Hey guys, tonight we travel beneath the velvet skies of ancient Samarkand, where the stars shimmer like broken glass scattered across dark silk, and every whisper of wind carries the scent of spice and dust. You're standing barefoot on warm stone tiles, the last heat of day seeping up into your soles. Lanterns flicker across market stalls, their light glinting off brass astrolabes and scrolls piled high like wrinkled pastries. You're not a tourist, though. Tonight, you're an apprentice in the House of Heavenly Movements, a misnamed building where scholars mostly argue nap and occasionally look up at the sky. In this city of domes and domed egos, astrology isn't some backyard hobby. It's statecraft sorcery and scheduling tool all rolled into one. Important things like whether to invade a neighbor or trim your beard hinge on what Mars is doing in the third house. And right now, Mars is, well, sulking, according to your teacher, Rashid. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're squinting at a star chart that resembles a poorly planned board game when Rashid walks in his robe, half-buttoned beard smudged with ink, and the lingering scent of goat curry in his wake. This is not a man you'd expect to hold the future of empires in his quivering hands. But he does. Or at least he makes people believe he does, which is often just as effective. Rashid is always talking to himself, or the stars, or occasionally to you, if you bring him his favorite tea, extra bitter, no herbs, served with a single dried apricot. His methods, let's say, eclectic. Yes, he reads the stars, but also tea leaves, goat entrails, the shadow of birds at noon, and once memorably the way a cat refused to sit on a particular rug. Omen of conquest, he said. The rug was promptly burned. But tonight, the city is restless. A rumor spreads like a spilled spice sack in the bazaar. Mongols have crossed the Oxus River. You've heard of them, of course. Who hasn't? They've got a reputation for turning cities into parking lots and scholars into kebabs. The merchants are panicking, the muezzins praying louder than usual, and Rashid. He's sharpening a pencil that he says, pointing to a smudge in the sky, is the omen of war. It's clearly just a smudge, possibly bird poop. But by morning his proclamation has made the rounds, and people are nodding solemnly, as if Rashid just predicted winter. And that's how it always goes. A major event begins, Rashid announces it retroactively, and everyone acts like he's just rewritten gravity. Historians still argue whether he truly believed in the stars or simply mastered the subtle art of saying vague things with great confidence. But no one doubts he's clever. When the city's mayor tries to flee dressed as a fishmonger, Rashid publicly declares that the stars demand brave leadership. The mayor stays. The fishmonger, well, that's another story. Despite the looming threat, life continues. You and Rashid climb the observatory tower each night, pretending to chart the heavens while mostly swatting at mosquitoes. Occasionally, you catch glimpses of real beauty, Venus shining low in the west, Orion sprawled like a drunk god across the sky. One night, Rashid pulls you aside. "There's a comet coming," he whispers. "Not a real one. But I'm going to say there is. We might need it." You nod like this is totally normal, because by now it is. And it's then, exactly then, that the letter arrives, sealed in wax, delivered by a man who smells like fermented camel. It bears the symbol of Kublai Khan, the ruler of the Mongol Empire, grandson of Genghis himself. A man who commands millions, dines on silver, and once had a diplomat sewn into a yak. The letter is short. It reads, "The sky Khan wishes counsel. Come east. Bring charts. Do not disappoint." Rashid laughs for a full minute. Then he packs a bag. And you pack one too. You don't sleep much the night before you leave Samarkand. It's not the excitement, though, let's be honest. Being summoned by the most powerful man on the planet does keep your mind busy, but rather the sound of Rashid arguing with himself while packing. Apparently, he cannot decide whether to bring the green robe with the embroidered stars or the midnight blue one with the lucky ink stains. You eventually choose for him. He packs both anyway. By dawn, you and Rashid are bouncing uncomfortably in the back of a Mongol caravan wagon surrounded by boxes of star charts, dried fruit, and one extremely agitated goat. Your traveling companions are an odd mix, two translators who barely agree on what language they're speaking, a Mongol guard with a spear taller than you, and a driver who may or may not believe the world is shaped like a beetle. The landscape changes quickly. The orchards and tiled roofs of Samarkand give way to rolling hills, then wide golden plains that seem to stretch into the afterlife. The wind here smells like grass and ancient smoke. You pass nomad camps where children chase sheep and elders smoke in silence, their faces like dried apples. Rashid, for his part, has decided this is a cosmic pilgrimage and insists on documenting every unusual bird you pass. At one point, he swears a crow winked at him and declares it an omen of favorable nonsense. You jot it down, just in case. The Mongols, unlike Rashid, are not big on unnecessary chatter. They speak in short-clipped phrases and make decisions with alarming speed. When a river blocks your path, they lash trees together into a bridge within hours. When a wheel breaks, they replace it in minutes, using what appears to be bits of bone twine and sheer willpower. There's a rhythm to the journey. Wake, ride, eat, ride more. Sleep under stars that look sharper than needles. It's rough but oddly soothing, especially when Rashid takes to reciting stories as you roll along, his voice mingling with the squeak of wagon wheels. Once he tells you a Mongol prince demanded his horoscope. I told him he was born under the sign of the bear. He insisted he was a dragon. So I told him the stars had made an exception just for him. He chuckles. He gave me a chicken. But not every story is funny. As you pass the charred remains of a small village, Rashid falls silent. You recognize the smellfire ash, something else, something too quiet. No one speaks. The translators pretend to sleep. The guard chews a root with grim focus. Historians still argue whether the Mongols' destruction was indiscriminate or calculated, whether they burned everything out of fear, strategy, or sheer boredom. What you know from the way the wind won't carry birdsong here is that something awful passed through this place, and maybe not that long ago. By the second week, the land flattens into endless steppe. You spot wild horses, wolves on distant ridges, and at one point, a man standing entirely still on a hill holding a flag that never moves. No one explains. No one stops. Then comes the snow. Not a blizzard, just a light dusting like powdered sugar over miles of plain. It gets in your boots, your hair, your scrolls. Rashid complains bitterly, then dramatically wraps himself in all three of his robes at once and proclaims he is now a walking prophecy of warmth. The caravan continues undeterred. The Mongols treat snow the way you'd treat a strong breeze, mildly annoying, but not worth changing your schedule over. You try to mimic their stoicism, but your nose is now an icicle, and your fingertips feel like forgotten raisins. And then, one night as you huddle near a fire with a borrowed sheepskin, something extraordinary happens. The sky opens, not metaphorically. Literally, the clouds part with sudden theatrical flare, revealing the clearest sky you've ever seen. It's as if someone scrubbed the universe clean. Every star blazes with purpose. You see the Milky Way stretch like spilled milk across obsidian Jupiter, hanging low like a lantern, and a faint green shimmer that Rashid insists is a celestial nod of approval. And that's when he says it, quietly, like he's not even sure he should. Kublai's been dreaming of me, or someone like me. He wants the stars to say what he already believes. We're not here to read the sky, my friend. We're here to rewrite it. You nod slowly, not entirely understanding, but also knowing you probably don't want to. The caravan rolls on, past rivers that freeze mid-laugh, past wolves that watch you without blinking, past mountains that seem to breathe in the cold, until finally, just as your bones begin to question their loyalty to your skin, the land changes again. You descend into a wide valley, cradled by forest, where bright-colored tents bloom like flowers in snow. Banners snap in the wind, gongs echo faintly. The city of Kublai Khan's winter court rises like a mirage, only this one smells like horse sweat and roasted lamb. You've arrived, and the stars above. They blink as if surprised to see you make it this far. You don't walk into Kublai Khan's court. You glide awkwardly, nervously, with the gait of someone who's had too much tea and not enough confidence in their knees. It's not your fault. The floor of the audience tent is so polished you could check your reflection in it, which you briefly do, only to find your hat is very much crooked. The court is a forest of silk and fur and ceremony. Giant curtains stitched with golden dragons sway like breathing lungs. Everywhere you look, something gleams: silver cups, polished boots, jeweled belts, even the occasional beard hair, so well oiled it deserves its own job title. You feel like a flea on a tiger's back. Rashid, for once, looks composed. He has wrapped himself in his midnight blue robe, the one with the constellations embroidered across the hem, and wears a smirk that says, "I've conned emperors with worse lighting." You suspect it's mostly bravado. You also suspect he might be slightly enjoying this. The room stills. You hear only the distant clink of armor and the shuffle of silk slippers. Then, as if summoned by the shift in temperature, alone, Kublai Khan enters. He does not storm in, nor does he glide like a ghost. He arrives. That's the only word that fits. A presence, more than a person, wearing layers of finely stitched fur, with a thin gold circlet, barely visible beneath his wide ceremonial hat. His eyes, sharp as falcon talons, scan the room, and then land on Rashid. You bow. Rashid bows. The Khan does not. He merely lifts one hand. You read the sky, he says. His voice is low, calm, almost bored. Then read this. He gestures to a silk scroll brought by an attendant, upon which is a map of stars, yes, but not your stars. Rashid studies it. It's a star chart, though, drawn with strange angular symbols and names that look suspiciously like someone tried to write while riding a galloping yak. This, Rashid murmurs, is a test. Kublai raises an eyebrow, and Rashid smiles, gently steps forward, and taps the chart 3 times. You have drawn the birth sky of your grandfather, Genghis. A gamble, a wild guess. But the room freezes. One of the advisors whispers something. Another stares at Rashid like he's grown antlers. Kublai says nothing, just nods, then points to a second item, a bowl filled with fermented mare's milk, the traditional arag. Interpret this, he says, completely straight-faced. You blink. Rashid doesn't. He peers into the bowl like it's a crystal ball, swirls the liquid once, twice, then says, "Ah." The signs are clear. The Khan must avoid goats on even-numbered days. There's a beat, then a snort from somewhere behind the throne, a stifled laugh. Even Kublai's mouth twitches. Rashid has passed the test. From that moment on, everything changes. You're escorted to a private yurt with thick carpets and a fire that doesn't flicker because it's too confident to waver. Servants bring food piled like offerings to some minor god of spicy lamb. Rashid is issued scrolls, attendants, and an official hat, which he immediately places on a statue of a fox. The great Khan has welcomed the Persian astrologer into his inner court. And you follow along trying to look useful while mostly staying out of the way, which is harder than it sounds when the Mongols start asking if your hat holds secrets. Days pass like lazy camels. Rashid is tasked with predicting auspicious days for everything from military campaigns to tea ceremonies. He reads the stars with dramatic flourishes, sometimes quoting ancient texts, other times making up lines in obscure dialects no one else speaks. Once he claims a lunar eclipse means the Khan should skip a banquet. When the eclipse actually happens, everyone acts like he just rearranged the moon himself. Historians still argue whether Kublai Khan truly believed in astrology or simply found it politically useful. What's certain is this: Rashid knew what Kublai wanted to hear, and sometimes that's more important than the truth. But not everyone is amused. A scholar named Yue Liang, an old Confucian who has served the court for decades, starts showing up during readings. He smiles too politely, asks too many questions, takes notes in a book that smells suspiciously like judgment. Rashid calls him the moon face. You're not supposed to laugh, but you do quietly. Still, the tension grows. Yue Liang is respected. Rashid is new. And the stars say nothing about court politics. Until one evening, you and Rashid are invited to a private dinner with Kublai. It's quiet, intimate, no guards, just 3 bowls of broth and a stack of flatbread. Kublai stares into the fire, then turns to Rashid and asks, What do the stars say about my death? The room stills. Rashid does not blink. They are silent. Great Khan. Too silent, Kublai replies, almost wistfully. Perhaps they fear me. Rashid leans in. Or perhaps they know your name is already carved into their light. You swear the air itself exhales? Later, as you walk back through snow that sparkles like spilled sugar, Rashid murmurs, that wasn't prophecy, that was theater. But sometimes it's the same thing. You don't argue, not tonight. The sky is clear. The stars wink again. You wake to drums. Not thunder, not hooves, but slow, deliberate drums, somewhere between a heartbeat and a threat. Rashid is already dressed. They're announcing a decree, he mutters, tying a sash with theatrical importance. Or a wedding. Or someone's favorite goat just got promoted. Could go any way. You step outside into a swirl of cold mist and anticipation. The entire court seems to be converging on the main assembly yurt where banners flap like restless birds and courtiers bustle with the energy of people pretending not to eavesdrop. Word spreads fast. The Khan will appear at midday. And Rashid, he's been asked to deliver a reading before the gathering. Rashid's reaction is mixed. There's pride, sure, but also the faint tremble of someone being asked to juggle flaming scorpions while wearing silk slippers. I need something big, he says, eyes darting skyward. A celestial event. Something undeniable. Something soon. You glance upward. The sky is blank. Just blue, unremarkable. The sun drifts lazily. There is, quite literally, nothing going on. So Rashid makes something up. He starts mumbling about a comet, a sign of divine favor, he claims. It will appear tonight, burning bright, over the eastern horizon. It will prove the Khan's rule is written not just in law and steel, but in stars. You watch him pace, muttering calculations and old Zoroastrian verses that might just be poetry or recipes. But what if there is no comet, you whisper. He smiles thinly. Then the stars will owe me one. You spend the day preparing. Rashid writes scrolls, burns, incense, rehearses, vague prophecies with dramatic pauses. You fetch quills, boil tea, try not to pace in sync with your own panic. This is bold even for him. If the night sky fails to cooperate, this won't just be embarrassing. It could be fatal. At dusk, the assembly gathers. Mongol nobles in shimmering robes, shamans with feathers braided into their beards, scholars who carry scrolls like weapons. And in the center, Kublai Khan, seated beneath a carved canopy, his eyes unreadable. Rashid steps forward. He bows deeply. The hush is total. Great Khan, he says, voice strong but low. Tonight the heavens bear witness to your destiny. A comet born in silence will burn in your name. Watch the east, and remember only those chosen by the sky receive such signs. A murmur rolls through the crowd, some impressed, some skeptical. Yue Liang, of course, stares like he's watching a child attempt surgery with a soup spoon. You wait. Minutes stretch like old leather, and then a streak, faint at first, but undeniable. A tail of silver white slicing across the eastern sky. Gasps, cheers. Someone actually faints though it may be from tight robes. The comet appears exactly where Rashid said it would, blazing, brief, magnificent. You don't breathe for a solid 30 seconds. Neither does Rashid. Historians still argue whether it was luck, a hidden calculation, or the world's boldest bluff. Some suggest Rashid had heard rumors from Chinese astronomers weeks earlier. Others say a comet really was due, and Rashid simply bet everything on its punctuality. The truth, like many celestial bodies, remains just out of reach. But in that moment, no one doubts. Kublai Khan rises. The sky has spoken, he declares, and it calls me its son. The crowd erupts. You find yourself clapping before you realize it. Yue Liang doesn't clap. He stares at Rashid like he's just watched a man pull a coin from his own spleen. Back in your yurt that night, Rashid is uncharacteristically quiet. He stares at the fire, sipping warm milk like it holds answers. Finally, he speaks. That wasn't astronomy, he says. That was survival. You nod. The flames crackle. He leans back, sighs, and says something you won't forget. Prophecy, my friend, is just performance in a robe. Still, the court is ablaze with excitement. Rashid is awarded new titles, some you can't even pronounce. Star-seer of the Golden Horde, celestial minister of the fifth heaven, tea advisor. He's gifted a private pavilion, gold-trimmed scrolls, even his own horse, which bites everyone except you. But with every rise comes shadow. You notice Yue Liang speaking more often with the other astrologers, many of whom now keep their distance. Polite, yes, but cold. You hear whispers, trickster, foreign charlatan, moon thief. Rashid pretends not to notice, but he starts sleeping with one eye open. At night you watch the stars together. He no longer points at constellations with joy, but with caution. They're watching now, he says. Every word, every silence. I need to stay one lie ahead. It's a dangerous game, but so far, Rashid is playing it like a master, even if the sky doesn't always tell him how. The winter deepens, and with it, the strange rhythms of court life. You wake each day to frost-laced windows and the distant sound of hooves crunching snow. The Mongol court, unlike any you've seen, is both sprawling and efficient, a caravan in freeze frame. Within the wool-lined yurts, political power flexes with quiet games, feasts to show favor, silences to signal displeasure, and increasingly prophecies to shape perception. Rashid is now a fixture in the Khan's schedule. His readings are public performances, attended not only by nobles, but also by rival astrologers, shamans, and ministers whose eyes glint like unsheathed daggers. He leans into the role, draping himself in a robe that now smells permanently of saffron ink and just a whiff of panic. Some of Rashid's predictions are safe. Rain will come before planting. Some are vague, beware a stranger bearing warmth. Some are wildly specific, like when he claimed the Khan's enemies would dream of goats before making peace. A week later, a rebellious warlord from the west sent an emissary bearing goats and dreams. The coincidence turned Rashid into a legend again. You try to keep up organizing charts, sweeping incense ash from ceremonial pillows, and intercepting the occasional angry message slipped under your yurt flap. Not all of them are subtle. One written in beautiful calligraphy reads simply, "The stars fall hard." Yuliang becomes bolder. He begins holding counter-readings gatherings of his own, where he interprets more authentic omens based on Confucian cosmology and actual planetary motion. His followers murmur phrases like purity of truth and non-theatrical astronomy. Rashid, in response, shrugs and says, "If I wanted to be pure, I'd have been a soap maker." But tension hums beneath everything. One afternoon, while Rashid is consulting on whether the Khan should launch a spring campaign against the Song dynasty, Yue Liang stands and interrupts. "You speak of the stars," he says, "yet your charts are Persian. Your sky is not our sky." Gasps, whispers, even the Khan looks up. Rashid pauses, smiles. The stars care little for borders, Master Yue. They shine on emperors and goat herders alike. A good line. A winning line. The court murmurs in approval. But afterward, as you walk back through the snow-dusted path between pavilions, Rashid mutters, "That man is sharpening something, and I don't think it's his brush." You notice small things. One morning, your charts have been tampered with dates, shifted constellations, misaligned. A servant you've never seen before lingers too long outside your yurt. A bird, dead and carefully placed, appears on Rashid's prayer mat. Historians still argue whether court sabotage was a personal vendetta or part of a larger philosophical war between traditional Chinese astronomy and imported mysticism. Either way, the message is clear. Rashid is being hunted with ideas and quiet cruelty. The Khan, however, remains aloof from the struggle. He enjoys the theater, the cosmic poetry. He laughs at Rashid's jokes, listens intently when the astrologer tells tales of Persian mountains that whisper their own weather. But loyalty in Mongol courts is as seasonal as the grasslands. Even favor when too bright can draw shadows. Then, one night, the moon disappears. Not just figuratively. A lunar eclipse, total red as dried blood, slides over the empire. The court watches in awe. Rashid, trembling slightly, announces it's a sign that old ways must give way to new. Yulong smiles the kind of smile that makes your bones feel colder. You later find out that Yue had calculated the eclipse weeks earlier and shared it only with the Minister of Records. Rashid never saw it coming. He bluffed. He bluffed well. But the game is shifting. In private, Rashid becomes quiet, thoughtful. He starts drawing symbols that aren't part of any known chart, strange hybrid constellations, half Persian, half Tang. I need a new language, he tells you, one that doesn't rely on their rules. One evening you find him staring into a bowl of water, muttering names you don't recognize. You ask what he's doing. Looking for a back door, he says. Every palace has one, even in the sky. And then it happens. An imperial aide, young, breathless, nervous, arrives with a message. Rashid is to give a reading. Not tomorrow, not in a few days. Now, in front of the entire court. The timing is suspicious. No occasion, no question to answer. Just read. It's a trap, you whisper. Of course it's a trap, Rashid says, adjusting his collar. The only question is, do we spring it or dance on it. You help him gather his tools, an old copper quadrant, 2 scrolls, and a pouch of dried fig seeds. He claims rattle prophetically. As you walk toward the assembly, Rashid is calm. Too calm. The yurt is full. Eyes gleam. Yue Liang sits near the front hands, folded quill, ready. Rashid steps forward, bows, and begins. He speaks not of eclipses or goat dreams this time, but of invisible stars, forces beyond even the Mongol sky. A future not written, but invited. You ask the stars to lead you, he says, voice rising. But perhaps they're waiting for you to lead them. It's bold, it's vague, it's almost sacrilege, and it leaves the room silent. Rashid bows once more, then walks straight past you out into the snow without waiting for applause or arrest. You follow heart-thudding because something in his eyes says we're not staying much longer. You find him just beyond the palace tents, standing alone beneath a grove of bare trees that clatter in the wind like bones strung on invisible threads. His breath fogs the night air. His shoulders are still, but his fingers twitch like they're rewriting some invisible scroll only he can see. So you say softly, "Are we fugitives yet?" Rashid chuckles, but it's tired. Not yet, but I've started packing mentally. A silence settles. Then finally, he says it. We need to leave before spring, before Yue Liang convinces the court that I'm more illusionist than astrologer. He kicks a bit of snow. He's not entirely wrong, of course. You don't argue. It's not the first time Rashid has bent the stars to his will, or perhaps willed the stars to bend. But there's a difference between poetic license and public heresy, and tonight's speech might have nudged the line just a bit too far. Back in your yurt, you begin the quiet preparations. You roll up maps, hide gold coins in bundles of dried herbs. Even the biting horse gets brushed in case he becomes part of the escape plan. The days blur. Rashid continues to fulfill his duties, smiling, laughing, offering readings with the usual dramatic pauses. But you notice how he avoids Yue Liang's gaze now, how he no longer lingers in court after sessions, how his predictions grow more cryptic, more dreamlike. The Khan will travel west, but the West will not travel with him, he says one day. Nobody knows what it means. Maybe not even Rashid. One morning, a letter arrives, sealed in green wax, no name. Inside a single phrase, the eclipse lingers. Rashid reads it, folds it carefully, and places it in the fire without a word. That night, he sits beside the fire, longer than usual, legs curled under him like an old cat. When I was a child, he begins, I thought the stars were people who had done everything right. Now I think they're just good at staying in place. You want to ask what that makes him a comet, perhaps flashing across sky and memory alike. But you don't. Some metaphors are better left unspoken. Then comes the snowstorm. It arrives suddenly, a white roar across the plains. Tents shudder, flags vanish. Visibility drops to a sheet of nothing. The court huddles indoors, the air thick with incense, and the scent of melting yak butter. And Rashid sees his chance. The storm is a sign, he tells the court eyes, bright. A celestial pause. The heavens are resetting. The Khan seems pleased. He declares 3 days of silence. No petitions, no counsels, just contemplation. It's the cover you need. You slip away under the second night's cover. No fanfare, no goodbyes. Rashid leaves behind his robes, his pavilion, even his half-finished star charts. All he carries is a small satchel of silver, a bundle of clothes, and one brass astrolabe with a crack down its middle. The horse predictably bites him as he tries to mount. Your path winds away from the court, across frozen riverbeds and half-visible trails. You travel by moonlight, cloaked in the storm's remnants. At one point, Rashid stops to whisper a blessing over a pile of stones. To the other versions of me, he mutters, the ones who stayed. Historians still debate when Rashid vanished from official records. Some suggest he was banished. Others claim he died en route to Tibet. A few conspiracy-minded souls insist he became an advisor to a rogue Mongol prince and helped design a calendar so accurate it frightened the emperor. You know better. You remember the silence of the steppe, the way the stars blinked quietly above, indifferent but watchful, and Rashid's quiet determination not to be caught, but not quite to disappear either. More like fade. You arrive at a trade post 2 weeks later, a sleepy outpost where men sell maps that haven't been accurate in years, and old women offer tea that tastes like boiled moss. You buy 2 cloaks. You trade a scroll for a ride east. Rashid doesn't speak much, but every night he looks up at the stars. Still there, he says once, as if checking on old acquaintances. Eventually you reach a monastery on a high plateau. Tibetan monks greet you with the serene suspicion of people who've seen everything twice. Rashid asks for lodging, offering a reading in return. One monk agrees. He wants to know if he should cut his beard. Rashid tells him, only if it begins whispering. It earns a laugh and a place to sleep. He seems peaceful there. Too peaceful, maybe. He reads less, eats more. One day, he hands you his cracked astrolabe. Keep this, he says, just in case the stars start asking where I went. You do, because you have a feeling they will. You're not entirely sure when Rashid begins fading. Not physically. He still eats walks and scolds the yak that keeps chewing on the laundry. But it's in the way he moves, the way he speaks. His sentences get shorter, his gaze longer. He sits by the monastery walls in the mornings, watching clouds drift like indecisive prophets, whispering to himself in Persian Chinese, and something else that might just be poetry, or possibly the recipe for his favorite fig jam. The monks say nothing, but they notice. They've folded Rashid into their routines without question. One day, a young monk offers him a brush and ink. Rashid draws something so intricate and abstract, it takes 3 monks and a passing trader to agree it might be a map of an eclipse that hasn't happened yet. Or perhaps a face or a goat. Your days settle into quiet. You help in the kitchen, stirring things you can't identify. You clean old texts. Occasionally, a traveler comes through seeking a blessing or soup or directions to some hidden mountain. You listen for whispers of Kublai Khan, of Yue Liang, of celestial accusations, but nothing reaches this high. Historians still debate whether Rashid chose exile or simply accepted it. Some accounts mention a foreign stargazer in the mountains who advised pilgrims and occasionally left notes tucked inside hollow statues. Others claim he wandered east toward the coast, where stars rise first and secrets go to sleep. You know where he is? You see him daily. And still it feels like he's slipping. One evening, while boiling snow for tea, Rashid says, "Do you remember the comet?" "Of course you do." "It wasn't luck," he says. "I knew it might come." Might. A whisper from an old Chinese scroll. But even then it wasn't the comet that mattered. It was the pause, the breath everyone took when it appeared. That's what I gave them, a moment of wonder. You nod. He smiles. Sometimes a lie can make people feel like the truth. He doesn't mean deception, not really. He means hope. The gentle fabrication that softens the harder edges of the world. The idea that maybe, just maybe, something out there cares enough to send signs. Later that night, you wake to find Rashid missing. You panic briefly, check the prayer room, the kitchen, the roof, which he once claimed gave better lunar perspective. Finally, you find him in the snow, sitting on a small rise head, tilted back, watching the stars. "I had a dream," he says softly. "The Khan asked me to write him a new sky." You sit beside him, pulling your cloak tighter. "Did you?" He shrugs. "I started, but I think he was already doing it himself." You sit there for a long time. The stars above are cold, precise, distant. But there's comfort in their permanence. Rashid hums under his breath something that might be a lullaby, or an ancient chant, or a recipe for tea. Winter begins to melt into spring. The monks invite you to stay permanently. Rashid declines politely. "I'm not meant to stay," he says. "I'm just between stars." He begins preparing to leave again. No destination this time. Just a direction south. You help him pack a bag of dried figs, a carved wooden pointer, a single scroll he calls the last horoscope anyone ever needs, though he won't let you read it. On the morning he departs, he hugs you for a long time, then whispers, "If anyone asks, I ascended." Ascended, you laugh. Into legend, he says, or a tax-free province. You watch him walk away down a winding path that disappears between pines. He doesn't look back. For weeks, you expect to hear news of him. A whisper from a merchant, a rumor from a monk, a vision in the steam rising from your tea. But there's only quiet. You take over his duties. Not the prophecy, you're not that brave. But the charts, the stories, the quiet humor with passing travelers. You even train a new astrologer. She's better than you, more careful with her readings, less likely to insult someone's goat. Rashid would have liked her. You keep his cracked astrolabe on a shelf. It wobbles when the wind hits just right, like it's nodding to some invisible rhythm. And every night before sleep, you step outside and look up. Sometimes you think you see a new constellation, a curve of stars you're sure wasn't there before. It almost looks like a face, or a map, or a goat. You smile and wonder if Rashid's still out there sketching false skies over real hearts, giving people just enough starlight to sleep by. You return to Samarkand one spring under a sky more dust than blue. The city hasn't changed as much as you expected. The same tiled domes shimmer under sun-baked haze. The same smell of cumin and ink and unwashed ambition wafts through the narrow alleys. Even the observatory, cracked, leaning a bit, but still standing, waits for you like a half-remembered dream. The house of heavenly movements, once Rashid's workshop and occasional nap chamber, is quieter now. The new astrologer is precise, polite, and utterly unremarkable. His charts are organized. His predictions are safe. No goat-based omens, no comet theatrics. The sky here has grown bureaucratic. You settle into a corner chamber with a cracked ceiling and an excellent view of Venus. Each evening you dust off old instruments, refold brittle star charts, and wonder if any of it ever truly meant anything, or if Rashid had just been the best storyteller in a city of nervous stargazers. One afternoon you find something strange, tucked in the back of a drawer beneath a loose tile, and 3 petrified dates is a scroll. Not labeled, not sealed, just folded gently like it had been placed there deliberately, but also forgotten. It's written in Rashid's hand, sort of. It starts like a horoscope, but quickly unravels into metaphors, meandering advice, and what might be a recipe for apricot stew. There's a line near the end. The sky is a mirror. It reflects only what we pretend not to know. You sit with that for a while. Outside the city, bustles with traders' students and the same type of men who've been pretending to understand astronomy for centuries. The stars wheel on overhead, impersonal and permanent. And yet, you begin giving readings again. Not grand declarations, just soft suggestions. Today is a good day to listen. Avoid promises made after tea. Look to the west, not for danger, but for something forgotten. People begin coming back. At first just the curious, then the anxious, then those simply looking for reassurance that the sky hasn't abandoned them. Historians might never include your name in their annals, but some travelers will speak of the quiet astrologer in Samarkand who told gentle truths and always offered warm tea with their destiny. One night you receive a letter. No seal, no return address, just a folded square of bark paper tied with a single red thread. Inside, still rewriting the sky. Found a mountain that looks like a sleeping horse. Tempted to name it after myself. Don't. Yours, R. You laugh aloud for the first time in weeks. He's out there, somewhere perhaps. Rashid still wanders, predicting weather, with chicken bones drawing stars on napkins, spinning legends into lullabies. And even if he's not, even if he's vanished entirely, the idea of him continues to orbit, like an unnamed comet, like a constellation no one knows they've memorized. The Khan never sent anyone after you. Maybe he was amused, maybe he forgot, or maybe he realized something important, that the stars are only dangerous when they stop being beautiful. Yuling's fate unknown. Some say he returned to the capital embittered and alone. Others claim he published a scroll denouncing the theater of the sky, only for it to be misread as poetry and widely celebrated. But Rashid, his myth grows. A merchant swears he saw a man who predicted a fish shortage based on a cat sneezing. A sailor in Hormuz tells of a traveler who could name every constellation backwards. A desert guide speaks of a figure who, when asked the future, simply said, "Bring an extra blanket." You add these stories to your own. One day a student asks you if astrology is real. You answer carefully, "Real enough to matter, not enough to trap you." She nods slowly, then asks if the stars ever lie. You smile, "Only when we need them to." That night, you look skyward again. Orion is fading into the west. A new moon climbs slowly, quietly. Somewhere between those lights, burning long before Rashid ever spoke them into fables, you see a flicker. No, not a comet, just something shimmering, like a wink. There's something strange about returning to a life that no longer fits. You're back in Samarkand. You walk the same dusty lanes, past the same fig vendor who swears his fruit is blessed, and nod politely at scholars arguing about the angle of Saturn's orbit. But everything feels quieter, as if the city is trying to forget its own stories, or maybe just waiting for someone to invent new ones. You still teach, still read the stars. But the work is no longer about prediction. It's about remembering. Remembering the feel of a cracked astrolabe under your fingers. The sound of Rashid mumbling to himself in 3 languages. The way the Mongol court seemed to hold its breath every time he spoke. Then, one crisp autumn morning, a traveler arrives. He's dusty, sun-worn, wrapped in a patched robe that might have once been blue. You don't recognize him at first, not until he pushes back his hood and gives you the same crooked smile that once made entire royal courts go silent with suspicion and awe. "Miss me?" he asks. You drop your chart. Ink splatters across a map of the southern sky. Rashid, he looks older, thinner, but alive in that bright, mischievous way that only he can be. He accepts your embrace without flinching, though he grumbles about the lack of warm bread. You take him home. Over tea too sweet, he claims Rashid begins to talk. He tells you he's been through the Himalayas, that he gave a reading to a prince who only spoke in riddles, that he once traded a horoscope for a boat ride, and then talked his way into steering it despite not knowing how. He doesn't mention the Khan or Yue Liang. You don't press. Instead, he pulls a crumpled parchment from his bag. It's a star chart, but not like any you've seen. The stars are connected in unfamiliar ways, forming creatures no one has named. A fish with wings, a bear standing on its hands, a goat playing a flute. This, Rashid says, is the sky I've been writing. You study it. It makes no sense. And yet something in you understands. Is it accurate, you ask? Rashid shrugs. It's not meant to be. It's meant to comfort. That night, you lie on the roof wrapped in old blankets. Rashid points upward, tracing lines that don't exist in any book. He names them as he goes. That's the sleeper's ladder, the echoing dog, the candle that's never lit. You laugh. You're just making these up. Of course I am, he says. All constellations were made up. I'm just doing it more recently. Historians still argue whether Rashid truly returned to Samarkand or whether stories of his reappearance were just that, stories. Some suggest this final chapter of his life was invented by his students to comfort themselves. Others claim he became a wandering mystic, a kind of folk astronomer saint, appearing and disappearing like a trick of light. But you know the truth. You spent months with him again, sharing meals, laughing at the stars, listening to tales about things that may or may not have happened. He never stayed long, always restless, always watching the sky. But each time he returned, he brought a new fragment of myth, a new story disguised as memory. One day, he hands you a bundle of scrolls. For when I forget, he says. You nod. You both know he's been forgetting more lately. Dates, names. Once he couldn't remember whether the moon waxes or wanes. He turned it into a poem, of course, but the moment lingered. A week later, he's gone again. This time no note, just a pile of stones by the gate. A farewell in his own odd dialect of sky and silence. You teach his stories now, not as fact, but as parable, as comfort. You tell students about the astrologer who once fooled the Khan with a comet, about the man who read the stars not to control the future, but to make the present bearable, about a life that glowed briefly across the heavens, then faded into legend. Some students ask if he was real. You always answer the same way, as real as the stars. And in some sense, he is, because you see him each night when you step outside and look up, not in the well-known constellations, but in the gaps, in the unnamed spaces, in the stars no one notices, until someone dares to connect them. It's late one evening when a merchant from Kashgar arrives at your door wrapped in dust and rumor. He's heard you know about the astrologer who vanished, and he brings a story in return, a trade he insists for the right tea and enough time. You oblige, steeping the herbs slowly, just as Rashid used to like them, though this blend includes orange peel and something vaguely minty, if only to see if the merchant flinches. He doesn't. He sips, then speaks. There's a town in the Taklamakan desert, he says, where they say a man can name your fears before you do. You blink. They say he watches the stars, but doesn't predict, the merchant adds. He listens, as if the sky is whispering to him, and he never charges more than a loaf of warm bread. You don't say Rashid's name. You don't have to. The merchant smiles. He draws stars that don't exist, talks about a bear that dances and a comet that sings. He calls it the other sky. It's a Rashidism, if ever there was one. You sit with the idea. A town lost in the desert. A man who rewrote the stars not because he believed in fate, but because he wanted people to feel less alone. The merchant offers you a scrap of parchment, folded and worn. You hesitate, then unfold it carefully. Inside is a drawing of a constellation, not one you know. A curved line of dots with a looping flourish like a question mark with wings. Beneath it, to those who see, even when the stars don't speak. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you climb to the roof of the observatory, wrapped in your oldest cloak. The sky is unusually clear, crisp, brutally honest. You scan it not for direction, but for possibility. There, between two known stars, you imagine the curve, the loop, the wings, and then something curious. You see a second flash, tiny, a pinpoint barely brighter than a firefly. But it's there. You blink, and it remains. A falling star, a speck of space dust, or a wink. You decide It's a nod, Rashid's kind, a reminder that even if the cosmos doesn't speak in words, it hums in feeling, that stories told often enough become constellations, especially the quiet ones. Weeks pass, then months. You begin teaching a new kind of astrology. You still reference the old charts, the ones mapped by scholars with frowns and too many elbow patches, but now you add Rashid's sky, the other sky. Your students are hesitant at first. Isn't this made up, one asks. You smile. All skies are made up. This one's just friendlier. They laugh and learn. They draw their own constellations. Name them for dreams, for lost pets, for memories they're not ready to speak aloud. You tell them the stars can handle it. They always have. Historians continue to search for Rashid. A few write papers questioning whether he ever existed at all. One insists Rashid was actually several different people, all mistaken for one man because of shared legend. Another claims the Mongol court employed no Persian astrologer during Kublai's reign, a claim confidently made without ever visiting the archives that say otherwise. But those who knew him, who felt his influence, who heard him mutter about goat omens, or watched him spin nothing into wonder, they know better. You eventually write a book, not a history, a story. You call it The Sky That Lied Gently. It's filled with maps that don't match names, that don't translate, and stars no one's verified. But readers say it makes them sleep better. That's enough. Years later, long after most have stopped, asking a traveler visits your observatory. She carries a scroll. It's old, weathered, and marked with Rashid's unmistakable symbol, a crescent moon wrapped in a question. Inside, only this. If you find this, tell the sky, I'm still listening. You do. You walk out, lift your face to the heavens, and whisper back, I know. The observatory becomes quieter with time. The bustle fades, fewer students now, fewer seekers of cosmic wisdom. Perhaps it's the new age of reason, slowly encroaching, or maybe just the growing sense that the stars, once intimate, are becoming distant again. Still there, still burning, but colder, somehow, catalogued, named, stripped of their mystery. You don't mind. You've grown fond of the quiet. In it, you tend to Rashid's scrolls. You preserve them not in glass cases or museum drawers, but by using them, sharing their metaphors, their sly humor, their half-lies that somehow spoke fuller truths than any chart. You begin to notice a pattern, a growing interest in the invisible constellations Rashid once mentioned. Travelers bring you sketches. Fishermen report dreams. A woman from the far north claims she saw the bear that dances above the ice. She drew it with coal on a scrap of cloth. You recognize it instantly. His sky is spreading. No one calls it Rashid's sky, not openly. It moves quietly through whispers, bedtime stories, tavern songs, and with each retelling, the stars shift a little their lines, bending toward comfort, curiosity, and a kind of celestial mischief. Historians still don't know what to make of it. They debate whether this emerging folk cosmology was intentional or accidental, whether it was a post-collapse reaction to empire or simply the result of too many bored shepherds and too little light pollution. But you remember Rashid's mutterings, his need to redraw what everyone else accepted, his refusal to let the sky be ruled by silence and science. Alone, you begin writing letters, not to anyone in particular, but to the stars themselves. Tiny scrolls tucked between roof tiles, hidden inside hollow bricks, folded under bowls at the tea house. You write things like, "He said the sky was only honest when no one was looking." The comet wasn't the miracle. The pause was, still listening. It feels foolish, but right. Then one evening, a child arrives. She's no more than 10, hair wild, eyes sharp. She holds a handmade chart drawn in purple ink and imagination. She points at a constellation shaped like a spiral. I named it the Whispering Cup. Rashid told me about it. Your breath catches. You met him, you ask. She nods solemnly. He said to find the observatory with the cracked window and the quiet person inside. That's you, right? You swallow hard, then smile. That's me. She hands you a stone, smooth, painted with a swirling symbol, one of Rashid's. You hold it like a relic. He said to tell you, she continues, that he doesn't name stars anymore. He just listens to them. They're very chatty when you stop trying to be right. You sit down right there in the middle of the dusty path and laugh until your ribs ache. You invite her in, show her the charts, the broken instruments, the tea cupboard with its alphabetized chaos. She stays 3 days, learns fast, talks faster. Before she leaves, you give her Rashid's cracked astrolabe. He wanted it passed on, you say, to someone who could find constellations in puddles. She accepts it with the seriousness of a royal appointment. You watch her vanish down the hill cloak, billowing behind her like a comet's tail. And you feel something you haven't in a long time. Joy. The quiet kind. The kind Rashid used to hide beneath sarcasm and saffron stains. That night, you write another scroll. Place it under your pillow. She's coming, old friend. The sky won't forget. You sleep soundly. No dreams, just a sense of drifting upward, gently into a sky still being written. Years roll over Samarkand like soft dust, constant quiet, and easily missed if you're not paying attention. You grow older, of course. Your hands tremble a little now when you ink star charts, and your knees make small protests every time you climb the observatory's spiral steps. But the sky remains steady above, unmoved by the slow sag of time below. And somehow, that helps. The observatory never quite becomes a museum. It stays too lived in, too full of teacups, paper scraps, and mismatched rugs for that. Travelers still arrive. Students still come and go. But the old rigidity has faded. Here, astronomy is taught with a wink. Mythology is invited to tea, and no one is scolded for inventing a constellation shaped like their grandmother's nose. You've named a few stars yourself now. Not officially, of course. The official names are Latin dense forgettable. You prefer the ones Rashid would have liked: the sleepy bell, the spoon that spilled, the camel who waited. One afternoon, a man arrives from the east. He claims to be a scholar from a distant academy, studying alternative astrological traditions. He wears spectacles too large for his nose, and carries a portfolio of documents he guards like a dragon with a paper hoard. He sits across from you awkward, in your too soft chair, and opens with, "So, this Rashid, do we have any verifiable records of his predictions?" You pause. Consider the question. Well, you say, slowly he predicted he'd be forgotten by the people who write things down. The scholar blinks. That's not quite what I meant. You smile. I know. You serve him tea anyway. He stays the night, pores over, scrolls, mutters about inconsistencies, and finally leaves with more questions than answers. But before he goes, he stops at the observatory door and says, "He must have been terribly clever." You nod. He was also kind. That's harder. That evening, you find a note tucked into a book Rashid once favored. It's in your handwriting, though you don't remember writing it. It reads, "Even the stars are still learning what kind of light to be." You leave it there. In the weeks that follow, the skies offer a surprise, a comet. A real one this time. Long-tailed radiant, drifting across the eastern horizon with the sleepy confidence of something that knows it's being admired. People flock to see it. You sit on the observatory roof, wrapped in a blanket that still smells faintly of cinnamon and old parchment, watching it arc across the heavens. You imagine Rashid beside you, chin in his hand, muttering that it's too flashy, probably compensating for something. You smile, then whisper, "You were right." Because, of course, he was. Not about the comet itself, but about what it does to people. How they fall silent, look up, and feel, just for a moment, small, in the good way. That night, a child asks you what the comet means. You lean in close and say, "It means the sky remembers you're watching." You don't know where Rashid is now. Maybe he's still walking the mountains. Maybe he's watching stars from a village that doesn't know his name. Maybe he's part of a legend told around fires, the astrologer who fooled the Khan and listened to the stars. Or maybe, just maybe he's finally found a place where he doesn't need to prove anything, where the sky doesn't ask questions and the answers don't matter so much anymore. What you do know is this: he changed the sky, not by moving stars, but by helping people see them differently. Not as rulers of fate, but as old friends. Autumn arrives in the quiet way it always does here, less a shift in temperature, more a change in the way shadows stretch. The figs fall faster. The air smells of wood smoke and memory. And one morning, you wake to find a thin layer of frost on the observatory rail, as if the stars have reached down to leave fingerprints. You've taken to walking before sunrise, wrapped in a robe, far too large trailing ends that sweep fallen leaves like a reluctant monk. The city is still then, still enough to imagine what it once was, before the caravan routes bent elsewhere, before Rashid spun comet stories and turned silence into applause. That's when you see her again. The child, now older, maybe 12, stands by the old observatory gate, tracing something in the dirt with a stick. A new constellation, a looping line with sharp turns. You watch from the shadows, not wanting to interrupt. She speaks without looking up. The stars are quieter here. You step forward. They trust us now. She grins. I name this one the goat who knew better. Rashid would be proud. She pulls something from her bag, a small folded piece of cloth. Inside is a letter. The paper is worn ink, smudged, the writing unmistakable. Rashid's. It reads, still rewriting the sky. Tell the stories, add new stars. Don't forget to look down. Sometimes there are constellations in footprints too. She places the cloth in your hands and says nothing else. She doesn't need to. You both understand. Later that day, you gather your students beneath the fading sun and tell them about the footprints. You talk not just about Rashid's predictions or his poetic lies, but about his ability to see the sky as something kind, something that listens, something that forgives miscalculations as long as you're trying to draw the story right. That evening you start sketching again, not charts, not measurements. You draw Rashid's sky as you remember it, chaotic, imperfect, wonderfully human. You add in new figures your students invented, shapes born not of myth, but of mood, one shaped like a teacup, another like a sigh. You connect them with lines that make no astronomical sense but feel true somehow. Historians might sneer, but the children love it. And you suspect Rashid would too. One scroll becomes 5. 5 become a binder. Eventually, the observatory's dusty back room transforms into a gallery of impossible skies. Travelers begin leaving their own editions, sketched on napkins, stitched into handkerchiefs, carved into wood. And so, the other sky grows. Each visitor brings a new star, a new shape, a new story. Not because they seek guidance, but because they want to belong to something vast, something forgiving. Sometimes people weep beneath it. Sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they leave small offerings, figs, stones, bits of thread, and sometimes, rarely, a messenger arrives. Always alone. Always unannounced, carrying nothing more than a phrase. He's listening. That's all. You log each visit in a quiet book. No names, just dates. The last one came from a musician who said Rashid helped him finish a lullaby by suggesting he rhyme moonlight with soon quite. You asked if that made sense. The musician shrugged. Did to me. That's when you realize something important. Rashid's greatest prediction wasn't celestial. It wasn't even a prediction. It was a hope that one day people would stop fearing the stars and start talking to them. Not for answers, just for the comfort of being heard. And somehow, improbably, it's happening. In Samarkand. In the mountains. In every place, Rashid left a piece of his story folded beneath the night. The city, once bustling with the sharp edges of trade and ambition, now seems to exhale around you. Samarkand is softer in your old age. Or perhaps you've simply stopped bracing for storms that never come. The observatory stands, just as it always did, leaning slightly to the west, as if listening to something far off. One evening you take a walk through the old quarter, where Rashid once claimed the pigeons could forecast the weather better than you. You pass the spot where he once declared a noodle vendor's sneeze to be an omen of military victory. You grin to yourself. The noodle vendor still sneezes. No one's won a war. People still ask about Rashid. You've become part of the legend now. The keeper of his memory. The translator of his sky. They ask if he really tricked the Khan. If he really vanished into the mountains. If he really drew stars no one else could see. You always answer the same way, only the parts you believe are true. A new generation now fills the observatory. Students of every age with chalk-dusted hands and wild theories. They mix math with myth, science with song. You encourage it. You teach that wonder and precision aren't enemies, they're dance partners. And the stars, they're changing. Not in the physical sense. No constellation has shifted. No planet reversed its course, but their meaning that's shifting slowly, patiently, thanks in large part to Rashid's other sky. You notice it in unexpected places, in the stitched pattern on a weaver's shawl, in the chalk drawing on a school courtyard, in the carved symbols on the side of a caravan cart, a goat, a teacup, and something you swear is the candle that's never lit. They're everywhere now. Quiet reminders that people are still finding new meaning in old light. One day, a letter arrives. No signature, just a wax seal shaped like a crescent, curled around a question mark. You pause before opening it. Inside a single line, I've stopped naming stars. I'm listening to their names instead. You stare at the words for a long time. Then fold them carefully and place them beneath Rashid's astrolabe, his cracked one, the one that always tilted just slightly east. That night a storm rolls in, rain against the observatory roof, thunder low and distant. You lie awake thinking of the comet, the eclipse, the silent ride across the steppe. Thinking of Rashid, who turned omens into poetry and fear into theater, who offered people not the truth, but a reason to keep looking up. You light a candle, one of the old ones he liked, made with fig wax and a bit of sandalwood, and you speak aloud to the ceiling. Wherever you are, you say they're still listening. The flame flickers as if in reply. In the morning, the storm is gone. The sky is washed clean. You step out to a world made quieter by rain, where every leaf seems to shine with memory. You climb the observatory steps slower than you used to, and open the roof panel. The telescope creaks. You peer through it. Not to measure, not to record, just to see. Venus gleams low in the morning sky. Beside it, a faint, unfamiliar pattern. 3 stars arched, just so, like an eyebrow raised in amusement. You laugh. Of course he'd leave one more joke. You don't name it. You don't need to. Some things, Rashid once said, name themselves. When you stop trying too hard, you sit with that a while. Then, go downstairs to make tea. One last winter settles over Samarkand. It's gentle this time. No biting wind, no ambitious frost. Just a slow softening of the landscape, like the city is tucking itself in beneath a heavy woolen sky. The observatory creaks more than it used to. So, to your bones. But everything important still holds. Your students grow more confident. You mostly listen, now nodding as they debate whether Mercury's retrograde matters, or if it's just an excuse for poor decisions. You grin when someone quotes Rashid without knowing they're doing it. All maps lie, one says during a lecture, but the good ones lie in useful ways. You don't correct him. Some truths don't need citations. One evening after the students have left and the candles burn low, you unroll one of the old scrolls, the one with Rashid's first drawn sky, the bear who sleeps, the bowl that tips, the whispering comet. You trace the lines with a calloused finger. They're messy, asymmetrical, wrong in every scientific sense. They're beautiful. That night, you dream. In the dream, you're on the Mongol steppe again. The air is dry and sharp. A fire crackles. Rashid is there, stirring tea, with a twig, mumbling about moon shadows. He looks up. You did it, he says. You kept it going. You try to answer, but your mouth is full of starlight. He laughs gently. You still take things too seriously. When you wake, the sky outside is velvet dark, pierced with cold silver. You sit up slowly, pull your shawl around your shoulders, and climb the steps one last time. At the top, you rest your hands on the railing, feel the stone beneath your palms, and breathe. The stars are all there, and maybe, just maybe, so is Rashid. Somewhere, someone is naming a new constellation. A merchant on a lonely road, a child beneath a threadbare blanket, a sailor staring up between storms, and somewhere, Rashid is listening. You step back inside, light a final candle, and write in the margin of your old notebook, "Let the sky remember." And with that you rest. Wind down 300 words. Now, if your eyes are still open, let them soften. Let the details blur. Let the walls of your room disappear gently like clouds moving past a full moon. You are back beneath that wide open sky. You're not in Samarkand anymore. You're somewhere quieter, softer. The grass rustles. The wind hums not urgently, just enough to remind you it's there. And above you, endless and slow, the stars shimmer faint silver patient. You can still see Rashid's sky if you want to, the bear who sleeps, the whispering comet, the bowl that tips just so. None of them are in any real atlas, but somehow they feel more familiar than the ones that are. You don't need to chase answers now, or worry if the stars mean something. You're allowed in this moment to just exist, to breathe, to rest. The constellations will go on turning. The myths will go on being told. And somewhere, perhaps not too far away, Rashid is still watching, still smiling, still naming stars with one hand and sipping tea with the other. You're safe now. The sky is steady. And even if no one else ever sees your particular constellation, it's there, drawn across this soft night, glowing just enough for dreams. Sleep well. And remember, the stars don't need to speak. They've already heard you.